So welcome everyone to our Resource YYC Lunch and Learn. So that you are aware, Resource YYC is a co-working community geared to professionals. We offer our Lunch and Learn sessions as a means for our community to network and provide meaningful learning opportunities. We also provide private office spaces, dedicated desks, day drop-ins, and virtual office options. If you are not yet a member with us, we encourage you to check out our website and follow us on social media. Links will be posted in the chat. And today we have Shawna Quigley, who is a passionate business and sales coach and trainer who is empowering small business leaders to build a stronger business, break free from self-limiting beliefs, and improve client and employee relationships. She believes that the right support increases your capacity to make great things happen. Over to you, Shawna.
Wonderful. So somehow I must have hid my little thing about me. So that was a great introduction, Rosemary. The only thing I would add to this is I'm also a sales instructor with the Canadian Professional Sales Association. And I want to say that about 3 years ago, I came into learning about social styles, and it was in an actual CPSA training course. And I have to admit, it was humbling to be exposed to it. It literally felt like I walked into a room that was dark and a light switch went on. And given that I had spent over 25 years managing sales teams, I had completed an executive coaching program, I thought I was pretty self-aware. And I certainly thought I was pretty good at reading people. And so when I saw social styles, there was this flood of instant recognition of all these things over my career of went, oh, that's what happened there. That's why that relationship didn't work. That's why, I wasn't successful with that customer and different types of things. So as we go through, I want to give you the gift of some of the shared learning and my passion around social styles. As we go through, the one thing I want to say about social styles is it's very easy to understand. Now, you may say at the end of this hour, you kind of went, it was a lot of content, but it is actually really usable and something that you can take into your territory and your field, working with your relationships. So specifically, what we're going to talk about, social styles is actually not a personality assessment. If that's what you were thinking, it's actually an observable behavioral model and assessment. There are 4 styles: driving, expressive, amiable, and analytical. No one style is better than the other. And throughout the population worldwide, every one of them is represented about 25% of the population. So it is strictly a style type. It has its positives and negatives, and that's what we're here to learn about. How do we actually work together, bringing out the best in one another's? So at the end, my hope for you is that you're walking away with insights about how people view your behavior, gain some insight in recognizing others, and build more high-performing relationships with one another. Now, when I say high-performing, I'm talking about those interpersonal relationships. So whether it's with, if you're in a sales role, if it's with your customers, if you're in a managerial role, it's with your employees, it's with your coworkers, team members, and even your senior supervisors. All of this really helps to, hopefully bring about this picture. This is, it doesn't look like me, but that's how I feel when I'm in part of a high performing team. So I hope that that's something that brings forward for you. So just in the chat, or it's up to you, Rosemary, if you want to have it, everybody can take off their mic. But I'm just curious in terms of, what is your perception of a high-performing relationship? If you were to define it, what are some of the characteristics or things that you would want to see or experience in a high-performing relationship? So either in the chat or verbally. And Rosemary, if it's the chat, I'll get you to pull those out for me.
So Angie's saying both of you or all of you are in your zone. Ed is saying collaborating. Jennifer said collaborative, engaging, action-oriented. Carrie said strong communication.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. You guys are off to a great start. Okay, so why is it important to build high-performing relationships?
So Angie said, best results for everyone. Happy.
Yeah. You know, it's that old adage of better together, right? You know, if you can take the best of everybody, you can actually have outstanding relationships. The other thing too is it helps to foster both confidence in one another and in ourselves. The better we can create those relationships. And in relationships, the more that we can understand and come forward authentically, the better we can build those relationships. And one of the things that you'll also learn is understanding how people perceive you can help to remove some of the negative types of things of, well, that isn't what I said, or that's not how I felt. So what would be some benefits that it provides you?
I feel badly. We're all just doing this in chat, Shawna.
Sorry, Angie, I can't hear you.
No, really? Can you hear me now?
Just need to turn your volume up a bit.
I turn my volume up. Let me try.
Oh, didn't hear that one at all.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Still very quiet.
Okay, I'll just go back to chat then.
Okay.
So Ed has said magnify each other's contribution. Mark said clear understanding in the communications. Jennifer said understanding each other for a mutually beneficial outcome.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
Angie says
and
happier
really
all around. Confidence.
love that. Love that. You know, and ultimately, when you get really grounded in this, some people will say, oh, it takes a long time to develop these and I want to get to action. But once you really get to know one another and start to play to each other's strengths, you can actually speed up action and have much more decisive action. All right, so you guys, you're in the minority here of knowing just how effective it is. So this is essentially, it's a success model that I'm going to talk about. So at the bottom, understanding behavior and responding appropriately. So that's both understanding your behavior, but others, leads to interpersonal effectiveness, which leads to success, which, as we talked about on that previous slide, you guys get a good handle on that. Now, this is an eyesore. Totally agree. It's a complete eyesore, and I'm not going to read it to you. I would just like you to have a glance down at some of these things. And you can see that social styles, the participants who have participated in this, had assessments and had training, whether they were staff managers, members, or salespeople, there was a number of really high level engagement and improvement that they saw by participating in it. Now, what I want to tell you about social styles is social styles has been around for over 7 decades. It's constantly refined. It's highly researched and validated. Over 50 million people have taken the assessment, and they've also taken it globally. So depending on the areas, there's some differences that have been taken into effect on a global perspective. But when you look at this chart, I'm hoping that you guys go, wow, there's a reason for me to take this and to start to incorporate that. Am I leading anyone on that, or can I have a shake of hands? Yeah, this is good stuff. All right. All right, so I think we learn a lot more by participating. So I want to share with you just a typical scenario, certainly one that I've seen played out many, many times in the workplace. And when you watch it, I would like you to think about, what did you observe and how productive do you think this relationship is? Okay.
Now we all have an agenda and a copy of the research, so let's get started. Now we all know the problem. I keep TriTech, one of our largest clients, from canceling the contract on the Mark I and jumpers.
Just a minute, Kyle, before we get too far on this, I feel one of our biggest problems is all this material.
I thought we agreed on this agenda and approach last week. We talked about the importance of getting our research together.
Well, just hear me out, Lana. Agenda and research are fine, but you have to admit this is getting completely out of hand.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's restrictive, and it always leads us down a path that is safe and boring.
Abby, we all agreed on this.
So what if we did? What we need now is something more innovative and impactful. We're not going to get that by being constrained by yesterday's agenda and reams of historical data.
My, how we exaggerate.
Okay. Has anyone ever experienced something similar?
Though I couldn't hear it hardly at all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was clear that that wasn't very collaborative, just by body language.
Thank you for identifying the body language. And especially if you couldn't hear it, then that was a pretty powerful communicator for you, wasn't it? Was that Jennifer who said that?
You betcha.
Okay. All right. What else did people notice?
Well, to me, there was no identified leader of the group that was trying to keep control of this meeting or this project. And someone had a thought process of it's my way or the highway. And it looked like somebody came to a meeting in a bad mood looking for a fight.
Yeah, what about anybody else? What else?
And-
What other things did you observe?
I couldn't help but notice that I think we probably saw all 4 styles, but you know, the one guy trying to like keep everybody happy, we all agreed to this, kind of a nice voice, but they obviously didn't agree on things ahead of time, or they took a different interpretation of what they had agreed to before, in terms of, you know, we said the words, we understood the words, but they meant something different to each of us. So when we come back together, we're bringing something different to the table.
Yeah, yeah. It really felt like everybody kind of came with their own agenda. Probably the exception to that was AJ, who was the person of, you know, well, listen, we talked about that, right? And in terms of body language, did you notice how some people were more laid back, some were really saying forward, some were much more communicative with their hands, some were much more rigid, and even in the tone of voice and the words that they said. All right. So I think we all agreed this wasn't the most productive start to a meeting, for certain.
And the one lady, it seems that she's of the mindset, the louder the better to get my point across and I will win.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it really talks about how they influence, for sure. Anything else anybody wants to comment on before we move on?
So one of the things that that I observed was a struggle to be dominant. And so the questions in my mind, isn't this domineering tendency, isn't that a social style? I have to be in control. I have to be the one that's running things.
Yes, well, that's a characteristic of one of them, which is driving. There's also, there's somewhat the characteristic also of the expressive. So for sure, you know, it comes down to, I'm a little sneak peek, it really is about how you influence. Do you try to be ask assertive, you know, trying to encourage the answers, or are you trying to influence and tell people the, you know, this is the way it is, this is my thoughts, this is the opinions. Anything else before we move on? All right. So social styles is around observable behavior. So it requires us to have a couple conversations, or a little conversation to clear up what behavior is, interpersonal behavior, personality. So behavior is really the verbal, what do you say, and the nonverbal, what do you do? Interpersonal, as that would imply, is it's what do you do and say when you're interacting with other people. Social styles is a particular pattern of actions that anyone can observe and agree upon when they're describing another person's behavior. So that's an important part of this. It's how people see us, the judgments that they make based on what they're observing, okay? Now, this is not personality. If you look at the observable behavior, that is sort of like in the illustration below the pie. It's that outer pie crust is what people see. Within that, the sort of the heart of the pie, the ooey gooey sweetness stuff, is that personality. That's what makes up who you specifically are, your ideas, your values, your hopes, your dreams. So again, this is all about observable behaviors and helping yourself to realize how people see you and being aware of how you're seeing and interpreting other people. Okay. So within say and do behavior, you'll see in the center section here, this observable behavior. And you see on the left and the right, there's traits and judgments. Social styles does not assign traits and judgments. We have a lifetime of doing that. It's something that we typically will do. So for example, if someone is very loud, I might go, you know what? I don't like him. He annoys me. And the fact is that person's just loud. So I personally am assigning a judgment or a trait. I might say, I really trust this person because they have really good eye contact. So again, we assign the traits and judgments. What we really are striving to do is focus on the observable behavior. So are they quiet or are they loud? Are they slower paced or really fast paced? Facially controlled. So if you think back to the video, the one character who is sort of sitting there pretty much emotionless, are they facially animated? What's the inflection in the voice? Do they have a lot of eye contact? Is there casual posture? So they tend to be sitting back, or are they really quite rigid? These types of things. So those are the observable behaviors that you're going to use to really help to identify social styles in other people. So the social styles model is made up of technically 3 dimensions. 2 are charted. So there's the first one that is assertiveness. So that goes left to right. That's that ask versus tell. And then there is the responsiveness, which is the controls versus emotes. So what controls the responsiveness is really how much emotion are you showing in your conversations, right? How animated are you? Or, are you quite reserved, sit back, very formal and rigid? Or are you someone who is very expressive and emotes a lot of emotion? So those are the 2 dimensions. Let's get into how those actually show up. So as we said, assertiveness is really about how we're influencing other people. It's the measure of how much we ask or tell people in our interactions. So on the far left, which is more asking, this person is probably much more cautious, doesn't share a lot of opinions, tends to ask a lot more questions. And then as it moves to the spectrum, is much more telling. So this is what I think, this is what we need to do, tends to influence and control their conversation through their actions. Okay. Jennifer, did you have a comment? No, okay. All right. So again, the say and do behaviors. I think this is sort of where it kind of puts it into place a little bit more. So when you look at the ask versus tell, you can say on the say, so pace of speech, people who tend to be on the left-hand side, which is the asks, they're slower. Versus on the tell side, their pace of speech tends to be much faster. The quantity of speech, again, to one side, a lot of quantity of speech, they tend to dominate the conversations, versus less, because those people tend to just be listening more, active listening, asking questions. And then volume of speech, again, much louder on the right-hand side of the tells and much quieter on the left-hand side. And then from a nonverbal perspective, so these are those do behaviors, right? Use of hands, are they fairly relaxed or are they very directive, pointing like this? What's the body posture? Are they leaning back or are they leaning forward and highly engaged? What's the eye contact? Are they really direct or are they less direct? So these are types of little indicators that I want you to start to think about when you're looking at other people and starting to question what style would they fall into. Then the responsiveness, so that's the up and down. And this is really about how controlling they are with or displaying their emotions. So at the top, the more controlling, they can come across as really quite rigid, very formal individuals, not a lot of engagement. Their hands are probably very tightly at their side, versus going all the way down to someone who is very broad, very expressive, very communicative, a lot of energy, a lot of exuberance that goes in. And you can certainly, you know, one end of the spectrum to another, it's very visual, that kind of behaviors. Okay, so again, how does that show up in those say and do behaviors? So on the left-hand side, and going up and down, so as you know, the controlled people, they're less inflection. Their voice is fairly monotone. There's not a lot of inflection. When you go further down, they're very, you know, very emotional, a lot of, you know, exaggerations and expressions. One of the key things that's really important about responsiveness is it's about what they're talking about and what their focus is. So when you talk about the controls, they're much more focused on logic and task. And that tends to be what they're talking about. When you come down, their focus tends to be about people. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not focused on whatever the objective is, but they tend to look at it from the lens of people. How will this affect my people? If I'm in a sales perspective, and I, you know, or even in the example of the video, she was much more concerned about how it was going to affect her customers, right? So that's a key differentiator. And then forms of descriptions. The people who are very controlled, they want facts and data. They're the ones who are going to say 33% do this, or this is going to provide us this return on investment. So it's very much factual information versus moving down, it might be more of opinions and stories. So those are some key things to look for. Then when you look at the nonverbals, so it is use of hands. At the topper level is much less. And as you go further down, much more. Again, that rigid body posture versus casual. Very controlled facial expressions versus very animated. And at each level, you can, you know, you might not see significant from one level to the next, but if you went from the top of the scale to the bottom of the scale, it's incredibly obvious. Any questions about that? Okay. So as Ed had said, and a few other people had said, oh, I can sort of see how these four styles are emerging. So here it is, very simply put. You look at the driving style. So these are individuals who are very teleassertive. So they like to control the conversation. They like to control the decision making. And they're very controlled in how much they narrate. They like things fast. They like things quite succinct. And they like to be the one in control. So when you recognize that in those individuals, you start to go, oh, okay, I recognize this and I understand these are some of the characteristics of them. So how can I best match that style to be effective with them? Then you drop down and you have the expressive style, which is also very teleassertive, but the difference is they are very emoting. They are people who are tend to be sort of that classic extroverted individual. They talk like this. They like to be the center of attention. They too like to control the conversation. And they tend to be much more grandiose. They like big picture vision. They don't like a lot of statistics. They don't like a lot of details. They like to talk in terms of pictures. All right. Then you go across and you have the amiable style. So that person is more ask assertive and more emoting. So again, this person is very much about people and understanding how we can best find the best solution for the people. They tend to be much more cautious, slower moving, tend to be the person who's asking more questions. And again, looking at it from the lens of how that's going to affect the people. Then the last one is the analytical style. So these again are ask people and very controlled. These are the people who want the facts. They really like to research and make sure that they've got the best possible solution. So they're very detailed oriented and like the time to make sure that they're getting the best solutions. I'm just going to pop this up here. So we just talked about that. So again, if I was to describe these individuals, here's some really great sort of indicators. So a driving, they're pretty independent individuals. They're formal, they're really practical, and they tend to be dominating. They take charge and they want to be the one. Then they do not like to be competitive with other individuals. They want to be the one in the driving seat, no pun intended. And the expressive, they're forceful. I have an idea and I really want you guys to hear it. They're animated, they're adventurous. And one of the key things about them is they're very impulsive. And this can be quite a challenge for them. We'll go into that in more detail. Then you have the amiable. So these people are the ones who are really supportive, they're dependable, they're open, they're pliable. And then the analytical, very serious, they're exacting. I take all my data, I understand it, I know it, I make logical decisions. But however, one of the things they can be is rather indecisive because they like to continue to analyze. So they can be indecisive in terms of moving to action, constantly wanting to have more information. How are we doing? Any questions at this point? All coming together. All right, so let's test this out. So you have 4 characters. You've already been introduced to them. So you have Lana, you have Abby, Kyle, and AJ. Now, here's an opportunity to look at another scenario, a little bit further along in the video than it was before. I'd like you guys to think about who was which style and what are some of the things that you've learned in so far in our time? And as you observe, what are some of the things that are coming up for you? Are you ready? And I'm sorry, Jennifer, I can't turn it up any further.
Sounds like risky business to me.
If you don't mind, I'd like to get something done today. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is that we just get started with something today without the details. Let's develop a plan and get going on it. I've got other things to do.
Now, Kyle, I think that we've been moving pretty fast lately, and I can see where Lana's coming from. The agenda's a good starting point, and looking at the material makes a lot of sense. Now, before we go out on the limb, let's just take some time to review the data and listen to each other's ideas.
Fine. The agenda and the research are in. We'll stay flexible. Is everyone satisfied? Can we finally start moving something forward?
Excellent, AJ. And a little more creativity in your approach wouldn't hurt next time either. I mean, after all, there's more to this world than crunching numbers. This historical data is meaningless to me. Let's try putting the wow factor into our solution this time.
Okay. So feel free either to chat or take it off mic, but what were some of the things that you saw? And who was who?
I can go first if you like, Shawna.
I love that, Angie.
You can hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Good. I actually originally would have said Abby was driving, but then when we saw more of her just now, the big picture, like, you know, not like enough with the data, let's just get moving. So I would put her in the expressive category, I think. Do you want me to go through all of them or just one?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then I would say Lana was analytical. She's the one with wants the agenda, wants the data, the analytics. Kyle, like trying to keep everybody together, collaborative, would be the amiable. And then AJ was a bit more of that driving. Let's just like move forward, get stuff done, do things. Would have been that's my interpretation anyway.
Okay. Anybody else? What, did you guys have any different styles or just even some observations on the different people?
Well, Jennifer's commented that she also thinks Abby was expressive.
Yeah, I actually agree with all of the points that were made.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think Abby was absolutely showing expressive to the maximum ability. Anybody else? What did you notice in behaviors? Think of those say and do behaviors. What were some of the things that really resonated?
Well, the Abby, of course, being an expressive, it's not was just her words, but she's more expressive with her leading forward and her hand motions and her eye contact. So she was definitely showing her expressiveness in her body language. AJ was showing his body language style too by being pulled back and more inverted in himself.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. What else? Anything else? Any other comments?
I thought that Kyle and AJ seemed to be impatient with this conversation and just wanted it to get going.
Okay.
The impression I had. So, yeah.
Was there anything else that you noticed? What about emotions that were starting to come up? Positive or negative?
Yeah, Kyle was definitely frustrated. I could, like that impatience for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Every time I see this particular snapshot of the video, Abby always gives me a little bit of a whatever in my stomach, because it's like, okay, now you're getting really confrontational. And, when we talk about, are we working towards a productive relationship? She's actually saying, just forget all the information, forget the agenda we've come to prepare. I have my agenda and this is what we want to do, right? She's kind of created her own little soapbox. And that's creating some anxiety with all three of them, right? Has anyone experienced a similar situation?
More than once.
More than once. How excited were you to deal with that individual the next time?
Well, one of the things that I looked at, you figure out what that person's about, and then you tailor how you deal with that person. You might have 3 different ways of dealing with, 3 or 4 different people in a meeting, but you have to figure out exactly how and what makes them tick, and how you can either get them, like in this Abby's case, how you can get her, I would say, calmed down to listen to reason or listen to somebody else's point of view, because she's laser focused in on an answer and a wow factor, and based on, like, she just wants to move forward without anything. And it just seems like AJ was falling in line just to keep things civil.
Mm-hmm. What's the danger if this behaviors keep going on?
Nobody wants to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the results are not there. So if they're collaborating on a project, the project will fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so where, as Mark said, we need to allow for other people's styles and work with. So for the one that's analytical, Abby should be talking about the figures, and the person that is amiable is to listen to them, even though they prefer not to talk. So to adapt in order for everybody to have their voices heard in the way that makes sense to them in their style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And here's another little tip is, for the people who are on the left-hand side, who are more ask assertive, those individuals tend to like to think about what they, have decided about something. Versus on the right-hand side, these tend to be a little bit more of the extroverted individuals who sort of talk through and figure out what they're thinking about. And so a really good, important thing to think about when you're building those relationships is, for the people who are the analytical or amiable, you need to give them a chance to process what they're thinking about it. So if, for example, maybe they could have had the information in advance so that they could review it and come prepared for decision, especially if the plan for this meeting is to walk out with an actual game plan. This is what we're going to do. Thinking through each of those, as Ed had talked about, what are the different characteristics of the different individuals? How can we best serve them so that we can work collaboratively?
Angie says, talk to think versus think to talk.
Yes, yes, yes. listen with that, the purpose and intention of understanding what the person is saying versus whatever your personal agenda is. All right, you guys are stars.
Sounds like
Oops.
Ed's
All right.
saying one reason Abby may be driving harder is that she feels not listened to.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that she might be feeling that way. Particularly if other people are trying to push on and she's come, this is her agenda, this is what we want to do, but other people are going, no, we're going to come out of here with a different outcome. We're going to analyze that data. All right. We're more and more in a virtual world now. So let's continue to put that to a test. So I'm going to tell you, I'm texting you this. Hi there, I'm excited to be hosting a virtual style and versatility session today. All right, here are 4 different responses. I would love for you guys to look at them and after I reveal all 4, tell me which is which. So number 1 says, hey, have fun. Let's catch up when you're done so you can tell me all about it. Number 2, how many people are in attendance? I have uncovered some additional information about social style. Can we schedule a meeting to discuss it in more detail? That's great. Let's talk next week because I have some ideas about how we can use that, what we're training, and do some new things in a different way. Can't wait to share my ideas. And 4, good. Do any of you get email or little texts like this?
Those are making me laugh out loud.
All right. Who would like to make some now fairly educated guesses? Who do you think is number 1?
Amiable, maybe? I'm not sure.
I think it's analytical.
You think it's analytical? Okay.
Number 1, I'd say amiable.
Another for amiable. Okay. All right. What about 2?
Analytical.
Oh, I got my numbers wrong. I agree with that.
You agree with that?
Yeah.
So okay. What about number 3?
Expressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about 4?
4.
Driving, probably.
I'd say driver too. Let's get to the point, driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are brilliant. You've taken that information in some of the key things, to the point Jennifer just said, right? It's very to the point, doesn't have a lot of conversation. It's good. So if you received a text like this, so let's say you're in a sales perspective and you're going to meet a customer for the first time and someone responds with good, then that's a good indication for you to do in your pre-call planning. How will I best plan my presentation and my approach with this customer? How will I build rapport with that customer? Understanding that they're driving. Number 1, you guys were great. Yeah, it's absolutely amiable. Let's catch up when we have fun. I'd like to hear all about it. So it's really that empathy, that concern for that individual. In 2, it was all about the facts and details, right? Okay, I've uncovered some details. And in 3, one of the things I love about number 3 is really, I can't wait to share my ideas. That's a clear indication of an expressive individual, right? Plus the volume that they're talking, even in their texts, right? That's an indication of how much are they driving the conversation and how much are they saying. I'm curious, had you thought about it in this term, Or is this potentially something, hopefully, that you're walking away with and going, oh, this is something I can add to my toolbox in terms of like text and how they're communicating.
I've thought about it in social situations where we're in person, but not in text form. So this is interesting.
Yeah, and it's very similar in email communication as well. So again, think about those say-do behaviors. And when you think about those things, it will start to come through as well in terms of how they're communicating, the volume that they're communicating, the types of words, the passion that they've got in it. All right. So key characteristics. So here's there's a lot of information to talk about this. So I'm just going to put these in. So there's 3 things that you want to know about. So a style need is really, what is the goal that that style is looking for? What's the style orientation? This is really how they typically use their behavior to obtain their goals. And style growth action, which is really, really important, particularly recognizing once you understand I'm an amiable or I'm a driving, what is perceived as a weakness by other people because of my style. And that's your growth action. So let's talk about that. So if we're a driving individual, our need is we're really focused around results. Our orientation is all about taking action. Just give me the information really quick. Let's make a decision. Let's go. But the growth action is to listen. As you guys identified before, this person really dominates the conversation. They're really trying to lead. They don't want to be in competition with others. They want to lead. So that's a challenge for them, is to actually sit back and listen to other people's point of differences and point of views, so that ultimately a better decision can be made. All right, and expressive. Their need is actually for personal approval, which is something really important to think about when you think about Abby. You know, it's important in those scenarios. How can we still have her feel like she's got personal approval by keeping her on track? So that's something to think about. The orientation is around spontaneity. Whatever is in front of them is much more what they're interested in. They're in the present and a little bit towards the future. And their growth action is to check. So they can get in there, as you saw with Abby. She's very ornate. She's talking about things, and she's not paying attention to what other people are thinking or saying. And it's important, both in terms of what she's saying, to sort of check herself, monitor. Am I giving other people a chance to speak? What am I observing? How am I coming across? So that's their growth action, because they tend to be very unself-aware, bad English, at that. That's really one of their characteristics of the greatest weaknesses. And amiable is about personal security. Their orientation is all around relationships. How does it affect all of the people? And their growth action is to initiate. So when I say initiate, they're the person who stands back. They like to gather the information. They like to listen to everyone's perspective. They want to go and survey and make sure everybody's happy. So they can be slower to action. And then the analytical. Their need is to be right. Their orientation is completely around thinking. Give me the facts, the data, the reams of information. Let me process that. I'll come back to you when I figured out the perfect solution. So in that situation, we don't have endless amounts of time. So their growth action is really about, okay, 70% accuracy is good enough for me. Declare an action. All right. So do you see how every one of them has a need orientation and a growth action? When we start to recognize that in others, it allows us that opportunity to go, okay, take away my personal feelings about that person. And it's kind of like a veil comes off and I see that individual authentically. And I go, okay, I'm an amiable and I'm dealing with a driving individual. Well, I know that I got to pick it up fast. I got to be much more decisive. I've got to initiate. I've got to say, this is my opinion. and be really focused around that. And conversely, that driving individual is going to be willing to listen to my opinion. You'll see that there's arrows going across. These are toxic behaviors. These are the most polarizing relationships, driving to amiable, analytical to expressive. So if you are one and you're dealing with the other, these are probably the ones you're going to have the most challenge dealing with. And so the more that you can think about and do something for that other person and understand, that will build that relationship better and start to create more productive relationships. That was a lot of information on that slide. Do you have any questions about that? Is it all seeming clear? All right. So, do we operate in our best when we're under stress? No. Do we usually end up showing up in some of our worst behaviors? I know I do. So I have to be really conscious about how I'm showing up. And so each of these behaviors have a backup behavior, which is the way that when stress is getting too high, when the tension is getting too high, it's how they themselves try and reduce the tension in that relationship. So with the driving individual, it's probably not surprising that they become really autocratic. So that's it. This is what we're doing. I'm leaving the room and we're doing it, right? They become very top down. This is what's going to happen. For an expressive, they tend to start to confront the individual to reduce personal strength. Because again, for them, it was about being personally acknowledged and validated. And you certainly saw that in that video with Abby, right? Towards in the first video, she was getting quite agitated. Amiable. So this person, remember, their growth action was to initiate, and their backup behavior is actually to acquiesce. They just try and remove themselves from the decision making. I'll go along with what everybody else has to say. That sounds fine, despite their opinion might be completely different than that. But in order to reduce the stress and tension, they will acquiesce, go to the whatever is everybody else is aligned to. And the analytical will just, okay, I'm avoiding. I've given you the information. I'm not prepared to make a decision. I'm out. Any consequences that come to this because you didn't take it further, didn't analyze it a little bit more, that's on you guys. Okay? Was there any last questions around that? Kind of made sense? All right. There's a third dimension in social styles, and that is versatility. It is completely independent of assertiveness and responsiveness. It is a measure and degree of interpersonal effectiveness. Simply put, it's how much you're showing an effort to manage the relationship in tension and view your efforts as skillful in doing so. This is the one thing that is modifiable, and you have a choice to change and to work on. Unlike the social styles, that is an adaptive behavioral style that you have grown up with. It's not likely going to change. But versatility is that measure that with choice, you're actually trying to adapt to other people's styles to make those relationships much more productive. And this is quite often considered sort of that star factor. Individuals who are highly versatile tend to have the best working relationships, and in selling organizations, they're literally the stars. All right. So improving your effectiveness with others. So this is building off versatility. First of all, know yourself. Know the impression you make on others. So as I said before, social styles is about observable behaviors. It is how people see us, not how we think people see us or how we interpret ourselves. Because quite honestly, social styles through TRACOM has proven that over 50% of the time when we do a self-assessment, we are wrong. Because it is about how people perceive us. All right. Second part thing is really learning to control yourself, learning to be tolerant of others' behaviors without becoming tense. So it's managing that tension level. And when you can remove it and see things much more objectively, oh, I get it. They're saying that because they're a driving style. That's their orientation. Suddenly, it doesn't feel as much as a personal affront to me. Suddenly, I can now objectively say, well, that's just who they are, and this is what they need. So again, it's about knowing others. How can you manage that? How can you respond to their messages to make that interaction much more effective and comfortable? And lastly, do something for others. Once you know what makes that person comfortable, you can try and accommodate his or her preferences. So here's something to think about. We've all grown up with the golden rule, which is treat others as you would like to be treated. But there's a platinum rule. And that platinum rule is around social styles, and it is treat others as they would like to be treated. So it is a little bit of a nuance there, right? We're working towards building those collaborative, close, high-performing relationships by understanding those individuals and trying to communicate in a way that's going to be effective and drive the relationships forward. Any questions that you have with regards to material that I've gone over?
Shawna, it's Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Just curious, I've done some, like I'm a trained practitioner in discovery insights, and I know you said at the beginning that this is more about observable behavior versus personality. I couldn't help but notice there does seem to be a fair amount of overlap. Like I could lay color on top of those. Is there, you know, is there some work, or have you done any work, or have any comments on that?
Yes, well, there's, you know, the founding fathers of all of the research-based assessment tools all sort of started in the same kind of grounding. And yes, there's a common thread of, you know, if it's DISC or colors, having the 4 different personality styles and fit in. Where it's slightly different is social styles is based on how people perceive us. A lot of assessments are, you take DISC, for example, and it comes up and it's ultimately how you see yourself.
Right.
And so one of the key differentiations there is, as I said, 50% of the time people don't really realize how people are, you know, how they're showing up because of their own personal biases and thought processes. The other thing that I would say is, I do have a lot of data and research on Myers, DISC, and social styles. And the common thread is social styles is much easier to understand. And, you know, so it's, you know, a lot easier for people to actually use. And it's actually validated in terms of research is actually better than Myers-Briggs and DISC.
Yeah.
And, you know, certainly you knowing a lot of assessments and that when you think about Myers-Briggs, breaking it down into 16 different types of things, and you talk about sensing versus, you know, it's hard to take that and go, okay, you know, this is quite a simple approach. You guys all rapidly were able to identify the different characteristics of each of them. And I think that's the beauty and importance of a tool, is giving you some sort of tool in your toolkit that can work towards building that. Did that answer your question, Angie?
It did. I love it. And I think, you know, I think for me, it's true. Like these other assessments, you answer the questions yourself. And so I'm going to, maybe the follow-up question would be, is this assessment, I'm assuming there's an assessment and it's done more by having what others observe of your behavior?
There's 2 assessments. So there's there's a self-rating assessment, so that, you know, that you can do that in yourself. You know, the downfall is 50% of the time you might be a little inaccurate. So I would suggest it's always good to talk it through. I've gotten these results. Are these the things that you see in me? Just to validate it. But there's also a multi-rater assessment, to your point. And that is where you have 3 to 5 people assess you. And I love that because you're getting much more accurate information about how you're being perceived. And the second part of that is it also shows you where you put yourself. And I can tell you many, many times I look at it and somebody will say that they're down in the far, left-hand corner of amiable, and they're coming across as expressive, towards a driving, it's, so it's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? So there's a couple additional webinars coming up. The next two that I'm doing with Resource YYC are much more sales focused. So that's happening on March 2nd, setting the right mindset for selling success. And March 23rd, which is the 5 most common mistakes made in customer meetings and how to avoid them. And what I want to say about the last one, when I'm saying most common mistakes made in customer meetings, these are highly experienced professional salespeople who are making these mistakes. And unless you've actually had sales training and really worked at overcoming them, likely if you're doing any sort of sale or even any sort of influential conversations with other people, you could certainly benefit from that conversation. On the right-hand side, there's a couple sheets that I prepared. If you're interested in having a summary sheet, email me for a copy of that. Or if you have any other questions you want to talk about social styles, feel free to email me. My email is there, Shawna@quigleycoaching.com. And lastly, reach out to me, connect with me. I would love for you to engage with me on social media. Also, you can check me out on my website. Join me on LinkedIn, Facebook. And I hope that this provided you some new insights that you can continue to build really positive, strong, high-performing interpersonal relationships, I can't speak today, with your fellow people.
Well, thank you, Shawna. That was a very informative session. And everyone be sure to check out Resource YYC as well for more sessions. And if anybody's interested in hosting a session, feel free to contact us. We're always looking for great, engaging speakers like Shawna.
Thanks, Shawna. That was really great.
Thank you. I hope that you found it really valuable. And I would love to have an offline conversation with regards to insights and some of your learnings.
Yeah, for sure. I'll reach out to you. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks, Rosemary. Talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.